Hello, welcome back to the channel. So in this video, we are going to talk about the self parameter in Python classes. So first of all, we'll start with this, that what is the self parameter which we use in our Python class. So first of all, the self parameter in a Python class method refers to the instance of the class. Okay, is referred to the instance of that class, means everything which are present inside the class, either it be a method or either it be anything, it refers to that. Okay, now when we define a method within the class, then we typically define it with the self as the first parameter. As you can see in this example also, I have defined a constructor and a method too, means a special magic method which is the constructor, and a normal method to display a function also. So in the both of this methods, you will notice that the first parameter is self. Okay, now this parameter is used. Why this parameter is used? So this parameter is used to access variables and methods belonging to the current instance of the class. Means anything which is within this person class, any method or any attribute. To access that attribute or method, we use this parameter self. Now one more thing is very important here to notice, that by convention this parameter is named self. But in technical terms, it is not compulsory to give self only. You can give anything as the reference variable. Okay. Suppose in this case, if I'll change this self to mine, so I have to apply the changes in all of the cases where I have used self. I have to change it to mine, but then also it will work and it will give us the output. So that I'm trying to say. Suppose here too, I will see it will give the output, but it's not necessary. It's not compulsory necessary to give self, but what happens, it is conventional that peoples are giving using self only, so that's why everyone use self. Okay, so moving on to the first example, which is the basic class and instance variable. We are going to see a basic class format and then the instance variables self. Okay, so about that, first we have created the class person, then we have, for initializing, we have used the constructor init, which is a Python constructor used to initialize variables and values in our class. So we have created the class, and if you'll notice, we have used the self parameter as the first parameter. Then in extra, we have given two more parameters, name and age. Then we are now for accessing this parameter also, if you'll see, we have used the self dot name. We are accessing this name and this age using this self parameter. And what is the self dot name? Then we are doing it equal to initializing this self dot name to a variable name, and then this self dot age to a variable age. Okay. Now after that, we are creating a method which is a display info method. This is a user defined method, display info. In that also, for accessing these above values, we have to give use the first parameter self. Okay, then we are printing the name, and now if you'll notice, we are writing this self over here, and then we are accessing this name here. Okay, then again we are writing a string age and then self, and then we are accessing using this parameter self, we are accessing dot age over here, as you can see. Okay, and after that, we have created two instances of the class person1 and person2, and we are giving the values name, as we have taken in the constructor, we have taken two parameters, name and age. So at the first place there is name, so we are giving name. Then at the second place there is age, and same goes with the person2 also. And then we are calling the methods with the difference instance of our class with the person1 and then with the person2. And again, when we'll call it, the output will be the same, name Alice and age 25, name Bob and age 30, like this. Okay, then we'll move to the next example, that is modifying the instance variables. Okay, now what we have done, we have created a class counter, And in that class, we have created a constructor with the first parameter self. Then we are initializing a variable here that is self dot value, and we are initializing it to 0. Then we are creating one more function, increment, a self uh, a user defined function using this self, and then we are accessing this self dot value over here, and we are incrementing it by 1. So what will happen whenever we call this method, this value will automatic, because this value is present in the constructor, it will get automatically called, and that time its value will be 0. And when we will call this method, then that value will be accessed and it will be incremented by 1. And then again we have created one more method to display that value. Again we have used the self, we are using the f string to print some strings and the variable also, so current value, and then in the curly braces we are printing self dot value. So means this, the last value will get printed over here. Then we are creating an instance of the class, means we are creating the object of the class counter, and then we are using this counter, we are calling this increment and display info. And when I'll execute this, you will see current value is 1 because we have incremented the value by creating our own user defined functions. This was the instance variable, okay, which is created on the go. Now moving forward, example 3. Now we will see the difference between the class variables and the instance variables. Okay. Now, first of all, we'll start with the class variable, that what are class variables? So the class variables are the variables that are shared among all the instances of the class. Now, in this program, this is a class variable. Okay. Why it is created? These variables are created to share among all the instances of the class. Now, they are defined within the class. Means these variables are also defined within the class, but outside of any instance method. Means outside of any instance method, or either it be a constructor or a special or a magic method or a user defined method, it would be it would be out of that class, or um, pardon, it would be out of that method, but it will be within the class. Okay, it will be inside the class, but it will not inside any method. This is the second thing about the class variable. Now the third part is they are accessed using the class name itself or through the instance of the class. Means they can be accessed using the class name, means directly writing the class name, and then if you write the name, as you can see I have written here directly the class name and then the variable name. So it can be accessed by that also, or you can create an instance of the class, means you can create the object of a class and then by that also you can access it. Okay, so you can do the both. Now, the fourth point is that changes made to the class variables are reflected across all the instances of the class. Means if you have created a class variable and you are using this class variable in, suppose here you are using that class variable. So if you are making changes, wait, I have executed this code. So forget this part. Forget this part means just forget this part. Suppose the last two lines, uh, forgot this part. Now, these two lines. Initially, the class variable, we have initialized the value to 0. So 0 is getting printed. Okay. Now, what will happen? And then we are printing the method, means the class variable in display underscore info method. Okay. Now, when I'll change the value to 10, what will happen now? And I'll execute it. You will see that 10 10 has been 0 0 has been changed to 10 10. Means if you are using that variable in different methods within that class only, so what will happen if you are making changes to the class variable, then it will make changes to all the places where you have used that variable within the class. Means inside all the method also it will be changed. Okay. Now the fifth part is that class variables are typically used to store the data that is shared among all instances of the classes. It means this is basically used, suppose we have a data which we have to share in all of the methods which we want to create, and we want that variable should be that variable or that data value should be shared in all the methods. So we create only one single variable and then we access that variable in all of our methods. Okay. So this was the class variable for us. I'll again make the changes to it. Okay. Now the instance variable. What is the instance variable? So instance variables are the variables that are unique to each instance of the class. Means they are the variables that are unique to each instance of the class. Okay. Suppose here, as you can notice, in the constructor I have taken an instance variable. Okay. And then what I am doing using this self, I'm accessing that parameter and I'm initializing it to the instance underscore variable. Okay. Now what will happen when I have created two objects here, means two instances of our class, my class 5 and my class 10. Now what is happening here, if you'll see, in obj1 I have given the value 5 and in obj2 I have given the value 10. So when I'm executing this, you will see this instance variable is different in obj1 and in obj2. So this is the first purpose. Instance variables are variables that are unique to each instance of the class. Means they are unique to each instance of the class. Suppose we are creating one more instance, obj3 equals then my class, and in this we'll write 15, and then we have to call this method also, obj3 dot display info. Okay, yeah. Why is it small? Yeah. Now you'll notice 15 means it is unique to each instance of the class. It depends on us. Okay. Now the second point is that they are defined within the constructor method. Where they are defined? Where this instance variable is defined? In the constructor method init. Okay, it is defined in the constructor method init and using the self keyword, or you can say the self parameter. Okay. Now the third point is that each instance of the class has its own copy of instance variable. Means each instance variable of the class has its own copy of instance variables. Means whenever we are creating each instance, different instance, it has its own copy of, means this 15 has its own copy of data. Okay. This 15 has a different instance variable, this 10 has a different, and this 5 has a different. Okay. Now the fourth point is instance variables are accessed and modified through the instances of the class. Means if you want to modify this, then you have to use the instances of the class. Means you have to use this obj1, obj2, obj3. Means each, if you want to modify this 5, then you have to use the obj1. Okay. Now, and the fifth point is that instance variables are typically used to store data that varies from instance to instance. The same thing as it was totally opposite in the class variables. When we have to access to all of the methods, then we use the class variable. When we don't have to access to each method, we want an unique instance variable, then we have to create an instance variables for different classes. Okay. And then we have performed the modification. What we have done, we have created a class variable 0 and we have created an instance variable, and we know that we have to create the instance variable in the init constructor. Okay. Then we are displaying, then we have created the method to display both the class variable also and the instance variable also. And notice one thing, we are using the class name to display the class variable or call the class variable, and here we are using the self which we have given here to display the instance variable. Okay. Now we have created the instance of class, as you have seen, this thing we have seen. Now here, when we have done modification, so how we have done the modification? We have directly called my class underscore variable, means this variable, and we have initialized the value to a new value 100, and then after that when we are displaying it using obj1 and obj2, then the value has been changed. As you can notice here, it has been changed from 0 to 100. Okay. So this was it, example 3. Now moving on to example 4, that is the last example. Now the example 4 is a class method. Now you will call what is a class method. So first of all, a class method are methods that are bound to the class. Means these methods are bound to the class rather than to the instance of the class. Means they are bound to the class. They are not bound to the instance of that class. Notice this thing. This point is important. They are not bound to the instance of this class. They are bound directly to the class. Okay. Then they can be called on either the class itself or on the instance of the class. Now the same thing, they can be called directly by using the class name or by creating the instance of the class. Here we have created the instance of the class. We'll see that also. Okay. Now the class method defined using the class method decorator. Now whenever we have to define a class method, we have to use the decorator class method. So decorator are some uh, built-in methods which call the different types of functions when they are initialized, and whenever we want to initialize the decorator, then we have to use the symbol. Okay, so class method, and after that when we will create any method, then they will be do that work. Suppose here only, first of all I created a class calculator, then I'm initializing the value class underscore variable to 0. Then after that I am using the class method decorator. To call that decorator, we have to use the symbol, and then we have to write the name class method. Now after that, we have created a def add. Now one more thing is to notice here that it is mandatory to take the first parameter, which is the conventionally named CLS, which refers to the class itself. Now this CLS is referring to the class itself. Okay. Now I'll show you with this example that what I'm trying to say. But the same thing goes with this CLS also, that it is a conventional name. Means instead of this CLS, you can use anything. Okay. But because it is used by many programmers and it is coming by day to day, so this is used. Okay. Now def add CLS, and then we have taken num1, one parameter. Now access this class variable. Means to access the class variables, we have to use this CLS. So CLS dot class variable, and you have changed the value to 10. Now we want to do this perform sum, so we have used the print function. Then we are doing num1 plus, and then we are calling this CLS dot class variable. So this 10 value is getting stored here, and then num1 we are getting from here. Obj equals calculator. We have created the instance of the class obj, and then using the instance of the class obj, we are calling our method add, and when I'll execute, the sum will be 15. 10 plus 5 is 15. Now what was I trying to say, that call you can call this by directly this way 5. So I'll change the value for you guys, so that 13. Okay, so you can directly call by taking the class name also, or by creating the instance of the class also. So I hope this video will be helpful for you guys to understand the self parameter and the difference between the class variables and instance variables, and then the class method. Okay, so thanks for watching the video. We'll see you in the next video.